Welcome, everybody, to the Fit4Duty podcast. That is a working title. I haven't figured out how to...
Subject to change.
Subject to change. Everything is subject to change in our world. I have BB Pro, Vaughn, and team. Myself, I'm Larry Brown. And if you've noticed, we have a very large special guest on our left side. Cris, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience here?
For sure. My name is Cris Edmonds. I'm the lead coach for MountainDogDiet.com, which if you aren't familiar with that, that's I work for John Meadows, and I'm privileged to be here, man.
Awesome. So me and Cris go back. Obviously, Vaughn is the more experienced competitor out of all of us, and we're all dealing with the COVID-19 situation. And I know Vaughn alluded to it on his Instagram story last night. So Vaughn, why don't you get into a little bit of what's going on in New York, especially with last night?
All right, so as you all know, New York is kind of ground zero for this thing right now. We're seeing infections, deaths, hospitalizations in tremendous numbers right now. I'm a detective for the New York City Police Department. I work the graveyard shift overnights. So basically, we have to respond to any deaths that occur within a household to do a preliminary investigation to make sure the death is not suspicious. And a lot of times that means we go to deaths when people are dying of COVID in their homes. And recently, these last 7 to 10 days, in a normal week, because I work on Staten Island, a small borough, not very populated, I would go to between 2 and 3 of those calls in a week. We're running 4 or 5 calls and just missing 2 or 3 other calls because the shifts are turning over for the day shifts from us. So, I mean, in a 12-hour, to make it a 12-hour span from 11 o'clock at night to about 11 o'clock in the morning, you're seeing anywhere here on Staten Island, the smallest borough, 5-6 people dying per night. In Brooklyn and other more populous boroughs, they're doubling and tripling those numbers every night from COVID-related symptoms. So, we are definitely in the thick of it right now, and hopefully they said this is the plateau, or what do they call it, Hasty? We're at the apex, and I'm hoping that's the case and that it declines from here. But it's all elderly people with pre-existing conditions, compromised immune system, health issues, immune compromised people. It's just kind of running like wildfire through that subset of people right now.
And it's funny. It's like you hold up New York to everywhere else in the nation, and it's a total juxtaposition. I know here in Nebraska, they actually slashed the expected death rate of people that are supposed to die in half. Mm-hmm. Cris, what are you seeing down there in Virginia?
It's really sad. Like, just as many people are out and about. Like, we aren't on a true lockdown by any means, but we are under, like, modified gatherings through June 10th in Virginia. So, like, all the gyms are closed, and, but they're shutting down, like, parkways and greenways for us to walk on because there's just so many people out. Like, when I have to go to the grocery store, like, there's still tons of people there. Do you guys see the same thing there where y'all are at?
Definitely here in Nebraska, they capped it. I think it's nationwide for Walmart. It's only 5 people allowed for every 1,000 feet of the store. Okay. And in Costco, for every membership card, only 2 people are allowed in. I know Vaughn alluded to it last week or talked about it last week, but just give us what's going on down there as far as grocery stores and all that.
Some grocery stores are going to a certain amount of people being allowed into the grocery store. Gyms are shut down. Sporting events are shut down. Large gatherings are shut down. They're starting to enforce more social distancing in the parks. They've shut down playgrounds. Anything that's considered non-essential right now in New York City is completely shut down. Times Square is a ghost town. Most streets in most communities, for the large part, are completely devoid of people. So, I mean, the social distancing, the self-quarantining, the isolating, the stay-at-home tactic is being employed here. People are in 65-70% compliance here, so it makes New York look empty. But some people don't get it, and they're still out and about. Thank God that's few and far between, but you'll still see some people who, for whatever reason, maybe they don't have a choice, maybe they don't think this is as serious as it actually is, or maybe they just don't care. But for the most part, it's people are listening and streets are empty here. Gyms are closed completely. There's no gyms. Precinct gyms closed down. Those were like kind of the last to close. A lot of guys who were cops, each precinct had a gym in it. Not anymore. They cut all that out.
What's really interesting is I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of international guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to see like 2 or 3 weeks in advance. So essentially like tell me a future, what's going to happen in the U.S.
Right.
One of the guys who I work with, he's from Malta, and they get like Italian TV where
Right.
he's at.
Oh.
And he was saying like, it's like terrifying. They're going into people's homes and inspecting and taking people's fever. And he's like, man, you guys in the U.S., you better watch out because that's coming your way if you don't take it serious.
There's a lot of states taking it serious, especially down in the South. I think even here in Nebraska, a lot of people are complaining about the way our governor is handling things. But Fauci went on the air and said he had a good conversation with the governor here, and what we're doing is akin to a statewide lockdown.
But here's the thing, with New York, we're worst case scenario when it comes to a bunch of different factors. Population density, population diversity. For whatever reason, it's this COVID thing seems to be killing the Black and Latino population at twice the levels it's killing the Caucasian and Asian population. So, and as you know, in New York City, we have a lot of Blacks and Latinos here. So I think that's why you're seeing things as bad in New York City. And those factors aren't prevalent a lot of places. Population density, the sheer numbers of minorities concentrated in a group in other places. So I hope we are the worst that you will see, and I hope that we just kind of had the perfect storm of factors that this thing feeds off of. And the more you remove yourself from New York and places, metropolitan areas like New York, that you won't see it get as bad. So what works for New York in terms of trying to keep this thing in check won't work, for example, in Virginia. It won't work in Nebraska because you just don't have the factors we have here in New York. You have to take this as a case-by-case basis. You can't make it a national thing. You have to make it a state-by-state, almost county-by-county thing, what strategies you decide to employ to prevent stuff and to stop it once it does flare up. So, we're all systems go here trying everything we can, but you may not have to do that in Nebraska or Virginia. Hopefully not,
Agreed.
Good. Well, moving on to a lighter subject.
Please do.
Let's talk a little bodybuilding. Cris, tell us how you got involved in the sport, and how your involvement in the sport has evolved over the years as somebody who fell in love with a Flex magazine and then now being the lead coach at Mountain Dog Diet.
For sure. My bodybuilding started because I didn't have anything to do anymore. My football career was over, and I was like, what do I do with all this free time? I don't have to be at practice. I don't have to weight train. And what I quickly realized was that I actually enjoyed training and preparing for football way more than probably playing the games. So I'd found a Flex magazine walking through Kroger with my mom one day, and I started reading it and trying like some of the exercises, and it was so different from what I'm used to in terms of the volume and the intensity. I was so used to being explosive, ripping box squats and hang cleans and things like that. Well, this was a total mix-up for me, and it was like destroying me, and I loved it. So that kind of led me into bodybuilding. I met a couple of dudes who were just fucking monsters, and they kind of took me under their wing because I was just this young, dumb kid who I would just train my balls off, and I didn't know any different. And they were like, oh, he likes to be tortured. So they kind of showed me, how to train like a bodybuilder, how to eat like a bodybuilder. And when I graduated college, I got into personal training because it was just an opportunity of a new gym opened in my area. And I met the dude who was the lead trainer. And from there, it just kind of took off because I was in the gym all the time. And I was like, man, I just want to attack this. And I love the sport. And I started studying it and learning about, everyone who was in it. So that was from a time range. That was like early 2000s. So, the the men at the time were Ronnie and Jay, and I fell in love with that battle. To me, that's what bodybuilding is. Both those dudes trained differently, but very aggressively. They pounded food, and they weren't apologetic about it at all. And I just loved it. So how that led me to Mountain Dog in a roundabout way. My training partners at the time, I trained with an Ohio State All-American wrestler and one of my buddies, and they both moved away. And I was kind of lost because we would just go in the gym. We had zero plan. Our goal was to just try to kill each other. And when they moved, I was lost. I was like, man, I'm in the gym by myself. Like, it's not the same. And I saw one of John's articles on T Nation, and I was like, man, this is a really cool training philosophy. It's very different than what I'm used to. So I did it, and then I reached out to him, and he's like, man, like, this is really cool that you found me. And this was before he was like really popular. He was still working at Chase, the bank, and he wasn't taking on a ton of clients. So I was really fortunate to be able to get on with him as a client early on in his coaching career. And then from there, like, it kind of just led to him and I linking up and training together. The first time him and I ever worked out together was at Elite FTS at the S4 compound with Dave Tate. And we slaughtered legs for 3 hours. And I think that was kind of a test to see, if I could hang. And I was 24 at the time, and I knew he was going to destroy me. And I was like, I don't give a fuck, but he's not going to see it. He was like 3 weeks out for Master Nationals and just looked like an absolute freak show. And then from there, man, like, it was just one of those things. I'd worked at that corporate Golds for so long, and I reached out to him one day. I was like, man, I'm so sick and tired of showing up to this job that I hate every day. If you have anything open, let me know. And he was like, yeah, I actually lost one of my coaches if you want to come on. So to make a long story short, I interned with him for like 3 or 4 weeks. And then after a couple years of working for him, he promoted me to his lead coach. So I'm really, really fortunate, man.
Great. Nice. Vaughn, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I actually have a couple of questions for Cris in terms of John's training and coaching philosophy, because I know one dude who was a client of John, who's a TV pro. He's also a former New York City police officer. His name is Casey Fati.
Yep.
And John tends to have a philosophy towards dieting that is famously known that not every diet fits every person. And he kind of does he show you how to hone into the individual, like how to study their body? What kind of changes do you guys look for before you make changes in a diet for someone, for example? And when you make that diet change, you also make a corresponding training regimen change.
Yeah. So when I started with him, I was really fortunate. I'd already built a decent career at prepping people. And then I'd learned through, like, Shelby Starnes did my nutrition for a while. Matt Porter did my nutrition for a while. And I'd done training with John for, I think, 8 years up into that point. So to kind of fast forward, when I started with him, I had very little experience with working with like monstrous IFBB pros. So what he did was, I was fortunate. He would like blind copy me, or we would sit down and talk about all the people he was working with. At the time, it was like Fuad, it was Sean Clarita, it was Josh Wade. So I really got to learn firsthand and see that like process of how he handled nutrition. And to answer your question about the training, that's one of the things, like, for the most part, the base or our heavy days, I don't know how familiar you are with this programming, but for the most part, we'll train the body part heavy, and then later in the week, we'll do a pump day for it. So that's more volume based. It's less nervous system taxing. It's you're not going to do any intensity techniques like drop sets, iso holds, partials, and things like that. So for the most part, our training doesn't change as the prep goes on, not until the very end. So, if you're two weeks out, we're not trying to like break records and smash squats on PRs and things like that. But at the same time, with the nutrition changes, that's going to just go person to person. Like, if you look at his philosophy, he's moderate protein, carb centric around your training sessions. And then he likes to keep a good, healthy dose of healthy fats in there for most people. Now, he prepped me for my last show, and my fats were rock bottom because that's what it took to get in shape. So, it's like you said, it's every person is a very unique diet plan, and it's very customized to, however many days you can train and recover from. And that's something else that's huge that we really go in. That, to me, that's what separates us. Like, if you can only recover from 4 days of hard training, that's all we're going to do. But if you can do 5, 6, or as many as 7 sessions in a week, why not do it if you're recovering from it? And that's going to stem from what we call peri-workout nutrition, which is, what you eat before, what you drink during, and then what you eat afterwards.
Hey, one more thing.
Yeah.
As far as now, what you do for Fuad or for Sean or for any IFBB pro, how much do you have to modify that when it comes to just a regular lifestyle client? And does John actually take on much lifestyle? Do you guys take on much lifestyle non-competitive clients? And are those programs different from what you would give a hardcore competitive athlete?
Without a doubt. Hands down. For the most part, if you looked at our more general population clients, they're going to eat far less food because they're not training hard enough to. And I don't want to sound bad. We definitely have normal general population people who train their balls off, but it's not to the same level. It's not with the same focus and intensity. And, it's one of those things. I would say that's the main thing is, obviously, if you're bigger, you're going to require more nutrients for the most part. We have a few guys who can get away with eating less. He's a prime example of that. I don't know if you guys see how he posts, like, just what he's doing to maintain his size currently. He only eats like two or three times a day. And I've witnessed it in person. Like, I've spent 3 or 4 days with him at a time, and like literally he only eats 2 or 3 times a day. It's wild. And still trains hard as hell. Like, that's partially, I think, it's got to be genetics for him. But to answer your question, the training for sure, just in terms of how deep they can push intensity. What I could take my dad through, for example, would be very different than what I would take you through on, say, a leg day or a back session, or, not necessarily, even if you scratch volume aside and say, we're only going to do 10 work sets. Those 10 work sets that you can take your body to, and Larry, you can take your body to, is totally different than someone who's never got to experience what a true work set is, in my opinion.
I think the intensity is what a lot of people miss. They'll look at what's on paper, and it doesn't sound like a lot. 10 sets doesn't sound like a lot. But if you do the shit correctly, it's not fun.
Oh, you should be dreading from the second work set. You should be dreading the rest of the workout.
Yeah, exactly. And like a lot of young guys come in and they just say, 10 sets, and they breeze through it. I'm like, no, homie, that's the warm up.
Right.
You haven't done anything yet. I remember reading a Dave Tate article, speaking of Elite FTS, where I think him and John were training either back or hamstrings. I think it was back. But he was like, before we even got to the work sets, we did 8 sets of pull downs, and then we still had the work sets. We just did the 8 sets to warm up and get really connected to the muscle. And then once the work set started, I wanted the workout to be over. And I think he thinks he only did about 10, 12 work sets.
Right.
But they were a killer.
Yep.
So, and this is a question for both of you guys. Why is intensity missing in today's bodybuilding scene?
All right. I'll give my opinion. This is the age of social media. This is the age of instant information. And I think people get paralyzed by all this information that they take in. And so now they're looking at all these different modes of training, all these different angles, and all the different things that you have available to you. And they're leaving out the number one thing, which is intensity. So I think a lot of people, hey, if I do this fancy thing from this fancy angle and use this special movement that I seen on that this guy do or whatever, that this is going to be the key to my success and the key to me getting gains. When if you just break it down to the 5-10 basic movements that you have, you could probably make a lot more progress with those if you engage the mindset of a Dorian, of a Ronnie, or anyone really who just attacks whatever it is they're doing. You don't always have to count your reps. Your body will tell you when you're done. if you're shooting to go to failure. And more times than not, I don't think people actually train themselves to failure as many times as they need to. I don't think people recognize what failure isn't when it starts to burn or when you can barely move it. That's you're just getting started there. So I think it's a mentality thing, and I think it's also a paralyzed by all the information social media and the internet provides us. So I think, in my opinion, that's why people don't necessarily train as intensely as they could or should.
I'm gonna piggyback off that because you nailed it, in my opinion. As much as I love RPE charts, and Larry, that comes with every one of our programs. It would do so much good to throw that shit away and forget RPE.
Right.
I almost think that we're trying to overthink this. And the way I look at it is, when I got into bodybuilding, you had Charles Glass, right, who was training all the dudes out in Venice, and it was like angles and volume. And you had like Jay and Ronnie, who were just trying to kill themselves. And then you had like Milo Sarchev, who was doing this in crazy amount of giant sets, right, and just running G8s and insulin out at incredibly high and making guys grow off the charts. I always found myself leaning towards Jay and Ronnie and looking how Milos took intensity to the next level. As much as I can appreciate Charles Glass and his angles, like if you look now, so many people are like, hey, put a band on this. And, I like bands, but they have their place.
Absolutely.
Too fancy with training. We forget to pick up barbells and dumbbells and just fucking work. And as simple as that sounds, it's a mindset. If you aren't focused on what you're going to do and hadn't been thinking about it all day, it's really hard to flip that switch once you walk into that facility to train. And if you don't have a training partner who's going to get inside your ass and push you on the days where you don't feel like getting after, and we've all been there,
Absolutely.
Long day of work, stressful, the wife might be getting after you. If you don't have that buddy to say, I don't give a fuck what's going on, we're going to train legs until you almost go up today. Because we got to get better, because you got a show in 24 weeks or whatever. So to me, it's all about locking in, honing in. And I think, to piggyback off of that social media thing, we're so used to just sitting there scrolling all day that, God, I see so many people in gyms just not focused.
Yep.
And if you can't lock in for 60 to 90 minutes, you're in the wrong sport.
And another thing too is that, and I'm not any scientist out there, I'm not trying to diss or anything like that, but we've seen a large proliferation of studies, and these studies have been misinterpreted. And what a lot of these studies and a lot of these scientific minds do, in my opinion, keep in mind, I'm Joe Blow Schmuckatelli, we've taken the hard work out of the science. We don't correlate the two to have people work really, really, really hard within set parameters that those studies present. Cool. That leads me to my next question.
Go ahead.
Has scientific studies helped or hindered bodybuilding training?
Bodybuilding training, I believe it's helped it to an extent, but now you see where the help has plateaued and it's beginning to hinder it more and more, because there are no bodybuilding studies. Well, we've had a cyclist do 4 or 5 sets of leg extensions over the course of 6 weeks while eating A, B, and C, and his legs got bigger. It's not a bodybuilding study. It's a hypertrophy study, yes, but it's not bodybuilding. You have to take bodybuilding for the art and science that it is and put it all together. And when you put it together, it's as different from me as it is to you, as it is to Cris. See, that's the thing about bodybuilding. There's so many different factors that you kind of have to correlate. And if you do it from a study, you're just going to get the conclusion of that one study for that particular thing that they did. And if and when it doesn't work for you, you're at fault because you didn't do the study right or whatever. So, you need to study yourself and take in all this information and put it in a package that works for you. So if you're just going to go by study, something that you read on PubMed or whichever academic site, and you don't know how to apply it for you, or as a coach, you don't know how to find a way to apply it for your client, then studies are actually hindering bodybuilding more than they're helping.
Without a doubt. I'm never going to sit down and believe, and this is going to sound awful, but I'm not going to believe a fucking pencil neck with a lab coat on who's training 10 soccer moms who hadn't eaten right in 6 years about how I was going to grow muscle. Like, it makes me so angry. Like, I want to rage, right? Like, you guys know how to train. You know how to eat. You know what goes into your mouth. You know what's went in your mouth for the last 10 weeks, 10 months, 10 years.
Right.
These people who are getting the studies done on them, I don't know how meticulously they're tracking their meal plan. What are they doing with their supplements? What are they doing with sleep, rest, and recovery? Are they training right? Is their form correct? Are they pushing intensity? Like, it's going to be really hard for me to draw a conclusion on a population that isn't me.
Right.
And I will always go back to what has worked for bodybuilders for the last 2, 3, 4 decades.
Clearly worked.
Right. I don't need a study to confirm that because it's played out for the last X amount of years of bodybuilding.
Right.
Success leaves clues. I mean,
yes,
they do. I'm not a fan of the bench press, but the bench press has created some phenomenal chess. I mean, I'm not even going to lie. James Hollinshead is a big-time bench presser over there in the UK. We've all seen Kevin LeBron's chest.
Right.
You know, the basics work. So this is something fun that I literally just thought of. With Vaughn being a pro and you being a budding amateur, about to break into the national level, hopefully soon. No pressure. Give me an example of what a back workout would look for you guys and how you would construct it. Because I believe there are similarities, but there are big time differences in how you guys approach your bodybuilding. So Cris is going to go first by virtue of him being the guest, and then we're going to give it to the seasoned pro.
For sure. So back is an area that I struggled with and still struggle with. Like, that's my worst body part as a whole. So it's taken a lot of tinkering to find what I believe is really working now. And it's a mixture of John's principles and me applying that with the exercise selection that fits for me. And that sounds really fancy, and it's not meant to be. It's just the damn truth. Like I told you, when I first found bodybuilding, it was Jay and Ronnie. So it was deadlifts, pull-ups, bent over barbell rows, T-bar in a corner, and a dumbbell CD cable row. And I got strong at that, but it wasn't yielding the results the rest of my body was doing because I would feel my arms, my rear delts, my upper back traps working like crazy, but not my lats. And I didn't have that like hanging meat that the rest of my body eventually developed. So now what I really have to do is a great job of starting it by activating my lats. So it's like a mixture of almost like posing and using a band to turn my lats on. And then I'll get into a rowing movement that is really friendly for me. I like that either like a machine hammer strength or a dumbbell or like the DY row works really, really well for me. And I'll start there, work up to a really hard set of like 8 to 12, and I'll do a back down set from that. So if I'm doing the DY row and I'll build up to 5 plates a side, I'll strip down to 3 and just really crank back and squeeze and try to drive blood into that lat as much as humanly possible. And I'm always going to start with a single arm rowing movement because it forces me to isolate only half of my back. From there, I'll do some sort of stretch, so either a dumbbell pullover or a straight arm pull down, and then I'll get into either a pull-up variation or a pull down or even a rack chin like Dante uses for DC training. And then I do a lot of volume typically for my back. So I'll do 2 other types of free weight rowing, whether that be with a dumbbell, single arm, or face down on an incline bench. And then from there, I'll do another pull down motion. So if I did pull ups to start, I'll do pull downs, and then I'll finish with some CD cable rows with typically a mag grip for my rowing movements. And then I'll finish my back off with either barbell or banded hyperextensions or rack pulls.
Yeah. Okay. So I've learned over time that because of my body structure, I have long arms. I'm 5'7" and I have the wingspan of a 6'1".
You're built like a fucking spider monkey.
Right. Exactly. Like my arms are crazy long. So I've come to realize that instead of worrying about the position of all of this, which is the majority of the length of my arm, I need to focus on pulling or rowing to where my back Hey, Larry, you disappeared. Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. So I have to really focus now on pulling in a way that's consistent with me activating the lat and not over activating it to the point where my arm escapes behind my back and I start activating rhomboids and rear delts and things that I don't want to train, especially for my lat development, because I believe that was one of my weaknesses from my first years of pro lead into my second year, and my back improved a ton between my first and my second year. That's the best my back has ever been when I competed in the Open in 2012. So what worked for me was volume. Volume, modifying my range of motion, and understanding that because my arms are super long, I'm not as strong a rower as I should be, but I know how to load it up and load the weight in a way and really concentrate on squeeze. So almost kind of Dorian style, not nearly as heavy, but definitely squeezing and driving blood into the lats and just watching my range of motion and pounding out the volume. I mean, work sets, four or five work sets for some of my heavy movements, and then stretching it at the end. So even if the stretch was as simple as just a hanging, just a hang, a dead man's hang, or pullover, the last movement that I did had to be a nice stretch where I could drive some blood into the lats and just kind of set it up for recovery afterwards. And that worked a great deal for me. That's what I noticed started working the best for me when I started paying attention to really trying to make my back grow.
So now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to keep the same format. We're going to compare philosophies, but this time we're going to move to diet. Vaughn, how would you describe your dietary approach to working with competitors?
Okay, so one of the first things that I did when I started coaching people, I coach mostly lifestyle clients, mostly first responders, mostly people who don't compete.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here. Did I blink out? Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. There you go. You froze up on me. It's that cat shirt you got on.
Oh man. Yeah, I just came back from doing a sanity walk with the wife, and I was going to change into a different shirt, but I kind of didn't have time, so cat shirt it is.
This is my work shirt, Hello to my fraternity.
There you go. Repping your fraternity. Yeah, man. So, diet wise, like I said, because I only have a couple of guys who compete. That's kind of all I want to take on because they're so labor intensive. And so, not that lifestyle people are not labor intensive. It's just that you literally almost have to tweak things 2-3 times a week, depending on how a competitor's body is looking or shaping up. I mean, they could stress themselves out because of any given thing. Cortisol levels shoot up. Body just shrivel in 2 or 3 days. Competitors, you know what I'm saying? I don't have that problem for a majority of my lifestyle people, so I can manage them easier week to week. But because a lot of my lifestyle people are not nuanced in terms of diet and nutrition, I always have to start them off with being. And my thing is with the majority of them is you don't eat enough. You don't eat anywhere near what you need to be eating for your height, gender, activity level, training level. Some of them may only train once or twice a week, but for the majority of people, they feel like, okay, I have to cut all these calories to start. No, like I've had people, I can't tell you how many times I've had people cut 10 pounds just by feeding them up, and manipulating their macros in a way where hey, listen, you don't need all this protein, but you need some more carbs. Hey, your fats are way too high. Hey, your fats are way too low, depending on what's going on with them as individuals. So my approach is a lot taken from a lot. I'll tell you the 3 guys I respect in terms of dieting the most in this industry, John being one of them. Jason Theobald, Scooby, I've worked with him. He's coached me. And Lane Norton. I kind of my foundation, my underpinning for nutrition comes from I would say 50-60% of those guys, and then of course things that I study from other people, things that I know happen to work from my experience using it or applying to clients. So I mean, it's a combination of things, but mostly it's what works for that person the best. You can say X amount of calories should result in this amount of fat loss. It's not always the case for everyone. So, it's a mix, but mostly, like I said, John, Jason, and Lane.
So for me and my clients, it kind of just depends. I definitely agree with Vaughn there. Like I have to get most people to eat more than they're currently eating. 9 times out of 10, especially female competitors, just aren't eating enough. They're just trying to starve and stay lean year round. And if they want to make progress, they have to increase their food. Same thing for most guys. Most of the guys that we get come to us, they're stuck or they're just in a bad spot, either nutritionally or metabolically. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're going to start from ground zero and just start building your calories up. So ideally, when you would start a prep, you aren't, 500 calories above
Right.
deficit.
Right.
So that's what I try to build people's nutrition. It's sky high. So when we start a prep or we start a focus of saying getting lean for summer, that we aren't already at say 2,000 calories, for example. I want to be well above that. If you looked at my nutrition strategy as a whole, I'm going to say around that workout window, you're going to get tons of carbohydrates. And tons of carbohydrates is completely person dependent. That might be 200, 300 for you guys. That may be 100 for someone else.
Right.
But for the most part, we're going to do a moderate amount of protein, 40 to 60 grams pre-lift as far as carbs, anywhere between 40 to 100, and then fat somewhere around 8 to 12 grams before training. During your workouts, depending upon how voluminous your sessions are and how intensely you train, your carbs may range anywhere from 20 to 100. And then post-lift, it's going to be very similar, 50 to 60 grams of protein, anywhere between 60 to 100 grams of carbs. And then we tend to keep fat on the lower end, below 5 to 10 grams post-lift. But then the meals outside of that peri-workout window, that just depends on what your goals are. So if you're trying to gain muscle, your protein and carbs are tendently going to be higher. If you're trying to literally burn fat, your fat is going to be a little higher than your carbohydrates would be.
Let's shift back to actual training a bit. I know, Cris, you've exhibited great condition, especially at your most recent show.
Yeah.
Took the overall.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And Vaughn, I've seen you up close when you won the Dexter Jackson Classic. What is the big factor in achieving nasty, grainy condition, the type of conditioning where it just makes competitors go, okay, I'm out?
My first year is because I was cut off in terms of my weight class, and I had a weight class to make. So I think people don't realize this. That was a primary thing for me, knowing that I'm capped out at a certain weight class. So all throughout the year, I couldn't let myself get too heavy. And so when I started dieting, I already started dieting probably from the leanest I've ever began a diet. And then I just went into it knowing, okay, I'm almost too tall for the class at 5'7". I look even taller on stage because I have long limbs and a short torso. So the only thing I'm going to have going for me, I'm not going to have the muscle bellies and structure of a Brandon Ray, for example. But you know what? I was like, the diet is the only thing I can control. So I just kind of adopted the mindset of, if it's going to take 1,500 calories for 6 to 8 weeks, you know what? That's what it's going to take. And if it's going to take 2 hours of cardio, I remember talking to Factory, and I was like, if I have to die on the Stairmaster, I'll just die. It is what it is. It's kind of a dysfunctional way of thinking, but this is within the confines of thinking as a bodybuilder. That's what separates, people who are willing to get into shape. And then, you know what? Once you're in shape, nope, 8 more pounds. So that's kind of the approach I took. And, you end up not needing to do a lot of crazy things if you just have the mindset that, the suffering is part and parcel of it. You chose to do it. And, be as competitive in terms of yourself. Like, don't give in to the cravings. Don't slip on the diet. Just be disciplined and structured and have. It's a mindset that I can't explain. Maybe Cris is able. I mean, you're a football guy. I know you're crazy competitive. I can't really explain it. It's almost insane.
So what I always think about, that moment when you just ate a meal and you're sitting on the couch, you're like, fuck, I have 2.5 hours and I'm starving. What I think about is I actually kind of get off on the fact knowing that how miserable I am, that other people are going to fucking cave in or quit.
Right.
They're going to eat a little bit more food. They're going to skip a couple minutes of cardio. They're going to miss a few reps on those work sets. Like, I think about that, and it kind of gets me fired up. So the hungrier I am, the more miserable I feel the last, 6 to 8 weeks, the more I know that I'm getting closer where I need to be. I think some of the attributing factors, Larry, of why people aren't in shape is, one, they don't diet long enough. They try to do it too fast.
Yep.
They try to over chemical or shortcut their way, and it's just not going to work. I prefer a longer prep. Then, like Vaughn, like you said, man, like when most people assume they're in shape, they need 8 to 10 more pounds off. So having someone with a trained diet that says, you're lean, you look good in the gym, but you aren't stage ready.
Right.
That goes such a long way. And the only way, in my opinion, you ever understand how lean you have to see somebody up close in person, or you've had to experience it yourself. And one of the things that helped me the most when John did the North Carolina Pro in Charlotte, or the Charlotte Pro in North Carolina, I was like a foot and a half from him. And that's the leanest I've ever seen a human in my entire life. And that forever is burned into my brain. Like, that's what conditioning looks like. I've never gotten to that level that he was at, but that's what I fight for. So it's almost just like you have to have this relentless mindset of, it's like you said, it doesn't matter how long I have to be on a treadmill. It doesn't matter how little I have to eat. Like, it's only in a short period of time, and how far can I push my brain to survive this shit?
Nice. I'm not there yet. So
it's a dysfunction.
Yeah, agreed.
yeah, no, I have foods that I'm around that I'll just crack over. Even if I'm not hungry, I'll just crack over. And we're talking about just general everyday. If I'm in competition prep, then I kind of surround myself with all things bodybuilding and almost become very one-dimensional. But like when I'm not preparing for a show, Oreos, I'll just crack around. I find myself snacking on almonds when I really shouldn't be snacking. It's like, Larry, you've had enough to eat. And that leads me to my next question. How important is the off season for a competitive bodybuilder?
It's what makes or breaks you. It depends. Now, if your goal for that off season, and a lot of, you'd be surprised, a lot of guys don't have structured off season. They don't have off season plans. My first 2 years of competing, I didn't have a plan in off season. I just couldn't wait to start eating a lot of food again, and that's what I did. Ate a lot of food, had a lot of energy, trained. Really didn't know if it's getting better or not until it was time for the diet. And then I started realizing you're wasting the most important period of time you have if you don't have a structured off season that is as planned out, as meticulously worked as your diet. If you wait to start working when the diet started, well, you're gonna wait for 2 call-outs on stage, So it's supremely important, a structured off season. Competitor.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Even the guys who already have the right amount of muscle. So if you look at someone like, Ramy, I don't think anyone's going to argue. He has all the tissue he needs, right? Absolutely. But to me, even those guys who are either maxed out of their class or their height and their weight, to me, the off season, you still have to build structure so it sets you up for a productive contest season. If you are just eating haphazardly and you aren't nailing meals, when it comes time to start that meal plan, it's going to be hard for you to lock in. And a lot of guys will lose 2 or 3, 4 weeks of a contest prep because they're still fucking around. Absolutely. And if you're structured in the off season, now at the same time, you can still probably go have a meal or 2 out with your wife.
Of course.
Not a big deal. But if you aren't nailing, say, 40 out of 42 meals in a week, right, it's going to be hard to lock in and say, man, I got to hit every single meal down to the gram for these next 12 to 16 weeks. That's why so many guys struggle at the beginning of a nutrition plan, or they come in out of shape. To go back to your previous question.
Like you said, 40 out of 42 meals. That's all you have. That's a great amount of consistency in the off season, and plus you need more calories anyway. So guess what? You just have to hit 8 out of 10 meals in a week, but a lot of people can't even do that in an off season.
Right. Agreed.
Now here's here's another question that I have, and it's back to training. As you can see, I'm a big training nut. Tell me about how difficult, or if it is difficult, separating the bodybuilder from the general population training. When you're training a client that's in Gen Pop, how difficult is it for you to separate what you do yourself as a bodybuilder from what a general population client needs to do?
You have to realize that bodybuilding, like I said, bodybuilding is a sweet dysfunction that we decide we want to engage in. And there's a certain limit that bodybuilders go past on a regular basis that we take for granted, that we don't realize that someone in the general population doesn't need to. You know, there's some people in the general population, believe it or not, they have no desire to look like us whatsoever. They want to be strong. They want to be able to do their jobs. They want to be able to feel good. They want to be able to look good in their clothes, but they don't want to look necessarily like we want to look. So, and then sometimes you scratch your head, you're like, man, we need to get your arms bigger. And they're like, yeah, but I like to fit into shirts. we don't get that, so like we have to, I'm not going to say it's a lowered expectation that we have to adopt. It's just a different mindset. Not everyone wants to, spend more money altering their suit pants, because they have to buy a bigger size, because they needed popping quads. We're the only sickos who think like that. So the general population, you just have to realize they have different goals. They want to have good cardiovascular condition. They want to be able to play with their kids. They look good at work, look good with their shirt off at the beach, but they don't necessarily want the look that we want as bodybuilders. So you just kind of have to, kind of cater your mindset towards that.
When I started training people in person, like that was one of my biggest things that I failed at. Was I thought if someone paid me to train them, they wanted to be slaughtered. Right. And our front desk staff would joke me and be like, we have to have the paramedics on speed dial for Cris because he's made somebody pass out again. And I've been like, hold on, we only did like 4 sets of squats and some leg extensions. This person's like lightheaded over in a corner, like throwing up. Like it didn't make sense to me. But going back to that initial question of intensity, is they had never really had someone apply intensity to them. So when I started saying, hey, we're going to hit that muscle and fully exhaust it, it was really hard for me starting when I was young, 23, 24 years old, to back out of that mindset of saying, hey, they don't want what I want. They don't want what my buddies want. They want to come in. They want to feel good. They want to look better when they take their clothes off in front of their spouse and not feel like their stomach hangs over their swimsuit when they go to the beach in the summer.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Cris.
Go ahead. No, go finish. Yeah.
My wife's a trainer. She trains people here, New York Health and Racket Club, and she trains people that are like elderly, like people who are they work from home before all of this COVID started. Now everybody works from home, and they just want to come in there half of the time, honestly, to have someone to talk to. They want to lift. They want to feel their muscles engaged. They want to feel strong, and strong for them means like, hey, I was able to do something that I don't normally do. So, the mindset for, I would say 90% of her clients is completely different than the mindset that she has when she trains herself. She's a bikini competitor. She had to actually learn that as well. Like it's not a step down, but it's a step away from what we're used to as competitors, people who have done athletics, people who train for bodybuilding. So it's a completely different world you have to realize you're stepping into.
Good perspective, especially for someone like me who just started writing programs for many other people. I have to really learn how to back off on the volume, but that's a whole other conversation in and of itself. I tend to go crazy on the volume a little bit. Cris, go into your sponsorships a little bit, man.
Yes, sir. Yep, for sure. I'm really fortunate to work with 3 great companies. Granite Supplements, as you see, that's John's supplement company. I tell everyone, like, I would use those products even if I didn't work for him, even if I wasn't getting benefits from it, getting products. That's how good it is. I believe in all of his products. If you look at our lineup, it's very, very basic. It's a quality whey blend protein. It's a joint care supplement. And then where, to me, the money's made is a recovery drink, or what you drink during training. So that's essential amino acids and highly branched cyclic dextrin. Like those,
Love that.
that is, oh, 1,000%, man. Like I write that in everyone's program. And like I said, if I wasn't a part of Granite, I would still write it into people's programs and I would still take it personally. I was fortunate enough to get in with John back in his biotest days when they were running plasma, and he hooked me on intra-workout nutrition. So, so Granite, great company. Iron Rebel, that's, again, another one of John's companies that he works with for clothing. They just fit great in terms of training, and I can wear it to the mall with my wife. And then as far as the last one is Rice and Grinds. Anybody that follows John's stuff knows how popular he believes in cream of rice. And again, he turned me on to cream of rice, and it's one of those supplements or products that, unlike oatmeal or your typical breakfast cereal that bloats a lot of people, causes like digestion issues, cream of rice tends to digest so much better, especially pre-lift or first thing in the morning for so many people. And then if you guys hadn't tried Rice and Grinds, like they just taste like candy. Like if you have clients that struggle to get carbs in and carbs down in the off season, I mean, 2 scoops of that is like roughly 70 to 75 grams of carbs, and it tastes like candy, literal candy.
I've tried them. They have great tasting products, man.
Correct. I'm very fortunate to be with all 3 of those companies.
Yep. So me, very simple. So I'm from New York, obviously East Coast. There's a guy out here named Muscle Chef, wrote some articles in I believe Carlo was with.
I think he was with MD for a while.
Yeah, Steve Bleckman's. He wrote quite a few articles, recipes and stuff. I remember he had a meal prep company that I used to use all the time, and then that company kind of fell by the wayside, and now he has Chicken Pound. So it's a very simple concept: grilled chicken, different flavors, delivered flash frozen, vacuum packed, delivered to your door in 5, 10, 20 pound packages, and they have a plethora of flavors, and they just came out with a Jamaican jerk seasoning flavor, which I've been suggesting to them on Instagram for the longest amount of time. And let me tell you something: to never have to cook quality or organic chicken, to not have to go to the market, get it, lug it home, season it, prep it, cook it, hope it comes out with the right consistency and flavor, like that's a game changer for a lot of people. I highly encourage my clients, because a lot of them are busy. They work, and listen, if you factor in the time and the money that you would spend getting the chicken, bringing it home, cooking it, or whatever, it's actually cheaper to buy it from Chicken Pound. So look them up on Instagram, at the Chicken Pound, and you can judge for yourself based upon what you see. And if you try to order the 5-pound flavor, a pound each of different flavors, and if you don't love it, I don't know, something's wrong with you, man. This stuff is the best. That's literally all I eat when it comes to chicken now.
I just had 5 pounds of that last week. It's delicious.
It's good, right?
Yeah, the barbecue, the teriyaki, the cilantro lime, all 3 of those are delicious.
Excellent. Teriyaki. My cat Donald loves the teriyaki.
Your cat is going to be stronger than you one day. Watch.
Got to raise lives. I'm trying to be the next. What's that guy? The tiger guy.
I'll tell you all the.
Oh,
I'm not saying.
I'm just gonna have like little cats though. Small apartment. What are you gonna do?
I ought to give you the boot from the show and find it.
I've never watched an episode. I've just seen the memes on Instagram. I've never watched an episode.
The memes are hilarious. The actual show, I got an episode and a half in, like I said, and I just looked at my wife and said, nope, I can't do it.
I haven't yet.
Don't. I saw a news article or an opinion piece that said that this is the first thing that Black people are happily excluded from. I could not agree more. But moving on, because we only got a few minutes left. Balancing life and bodybuilding. How do you guys do it?
I'll defer to Cris on this one.
Okay, for sure. That can be very hard for me pre-contest. I'm just going to be blatantly honest. Pre-contest, that's very challenging for me. In the off season, I'm way, way better at it. I have two sons and a wife, and luckily both my wife and I work from home year round, anyways. So I get a lot of quality time with her. But what I've found to work best for me is like I just have to simply turn work off, or when I'm not in the gym, I can't be obsessing about it like I was in my younger years. I tend to be very, very OCD as a person, and I have a very addictive personality. So it's very easy for me to get like super tunnel visioned. And that's why I said, like, I fail at that pre-contest. Like the last 6 to 8 weeks, I always, like, I joke, but it's not really a joke that I just pray my wife's not going to leave me after the next contest prep. because like, that's all I can think about. It's all I can focus on, that next meal, that next training session, next cardio, whatever. But yeah, it's very challenging pre-contest. But again, in the off season, like I always try to, we try to take family vacations, or after a certain time, I'll turn my phone off. And not respond to emails until the boys go to bed. Because Larry, as you know, I'm a crazy workaholic for John, and I work 7 days a week because we have clients that need help. And to me, like if I'm not helping them get towards their goals, then I'm failing them as a coach. So I have very little boundary when it comes to that. But as far as balance, it's one of those things that to me, I'm always trying to get better. And with time and with age, I feel like I'm getting better at it.
What about you, Vaughn?
Well, since I haven't competed in a long time, I can only try to reminisce on this particular aspect.
But I mean, you actively train, and you just started jujitsu, so like you're still passionate about it.
Right. And here's the great thing. My wife, who I believe is even more genetically gifted in terms of physique competitions than I am, she's been training in the gym since she's been 16. So we share a mutual love of training, and she just recently started competing a couple of years ago. She's done a couple of shows now, and I'm trying to. She says she quit. I remember you said earlier, Cris, you love the process. When it came to football, you love the process more than you love the games. That's the way she is. Like she'll literally just do a diet and like get shredded and won't compete. Like she loves the process more than she loves the stage. I think she also has a pro card in her. So I'm going to keep pushing her on that, just gently. So it makes it a lot easier when the person you're with kind of can share that lifestyle with you. Like we talk about macros and clients and training, and we watch training videos together. She knows a lot about bodybuilding. She's teaching me about the bikini side. Like I know who some of the girls are now, where I honestly didn't pay attention to it before. It was all bodybuilding all the time. So now I have that going for me. And in terms of balance with work, I have 18 and a half years as a police officer. When I get off of work, like I don't think about police work anymore. I think about my wife, I think about my clients, and I think about jujitsu. And it's gotten easier the longer I've done it. And that's the kind of what I tell to you, Cris. As long as you make sure you keep focusing on family and whatever, it takes a while, especially if you're saying you have that addictive personality. I know that's you're not going to be a good bodybuilder unless you have that mindset, unless you have that personality. But the more you realize that when it's not time for bodybuilding, focus on family and being present, whatever, which is what my wife is kind of teaching me now, making sure I'm present in the moment when I'm not doing the things that I love. Be present, be there, be mindful, be thoughtful of other things. And little by little, you let your stubbornness go, and that balance starts to become a little bit better over time.
And I'm not as good as either of you, but that's a problem I very, very much have, and I'm trying to work through being sensitive to my wife's needs and understand I can't be Larry the meathead all the time. I've had to cut down my gym days to 4, which is fine, very manageable. People got big as hell and strong as hell and won shows off of training just 4 days a week, but working really, really, really hard within that 4 days. So that's something that I struggle with. It's not even I do struggle with it because naturally I'm a selfish person. I grew up kind of an only child, even though I had an older brother and sister. So like Vaughn says, I'm working on being mindful for that mindful for the time that I'm with her. Like when I get done here, I'm cooking dinner. We're gonna look at Chicago PD. So best show on television, by the way.
Blue Bloods. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Your bias is showing, but that's all right. But it's just being mindful in that. So we're at the hour mark right now, which is a pretty good time that we've decided to pretty good, decent amount of time for the podcast. But I got one more question for each of you, and I want you to think of it real fast.
Sure.
COVID comes down again. We have to quarantine. Gyms get closed, unfortunately. Build your ideal home gym.
Squat rack, bench, some pull-up stuff. Of course, a couple dumbbells. I don't need it to get heavier than kettlebells. Big time. My wife to listen to the professional trainer. Kettlebells. You can do a lot bodybuilding wise and strength and power wise with a good kettlebell set. So just a basic rack, something to squat in. I'm not a big fan of putting the bar on my back, externally rotating my shoulders behind me. So I need the either transformer bar or I'll need what do you call the bar?
Safety bar.
Safety bar. Yeah, one of those two. And I think that'll be enough for me. Everything else I can improvise.
So power rack, dumbbells probably 20 to 120, leg curl, leg extension, and a couple back pieces by either Arsenal or Hammer Strength or Prime. That's what I'd go with. Super basic, but yeah.
I'm disappointed in both of y'all. Y'all didn't go heavy enough on the dumbbells. I was expecting at least 150. You monsters, y'all going to 120. What's wrong with you? I'd expect that from an old man like John, but not from two young guns. Disappointing.
Bro, I'm going to be 45 at the end of the year, bro. These joints are not what they used to be. And like I said, I'm in the NYPD, so there's only but so much I can do for these joints. So.
Well, maybe you should take Granite's joint supplement, shouldn't
you? You can use my discount code.
Cris, thank you so much for joining us. We had some technical difficulties, but I think I found a way to get guests on here, and that's because of my food bar that you tested out, so I appreciate it. Thank you again for coming on. Vaughn, it's always a pleasure talking with you damn near every day now. So you enjoy your off night. Be safe on those streets. Be safe to both of you. So for Cris Edmonds, Vaughn and Teen, I'm Larry Brown sitting here in darkness, and my wife is going to kill me if I don't help with this baby. Fit4Duty podcast. Thanks again for listening. Catch us on iTunes and YouTube, and we'll see you next time.
All right, guys.